Ever get that feeling, that little nudge inside saying, there's got to be a better way, or maybe I really want to make this happen?
Uh-huh.
Whether it's, crushing a fitness goal, or maybe nailing a presentation at work, or just feeling more comfortable meeting new people. We all have those areas, right,
Mhm.
where we're striving for something more.
Definitely.
And today, well, we're digging into a really interesting resource that tackles exactly that drive for personal change, something you actually flagged for us.
That's right. We've got Double Your Dating How to Change Yourself by David DeAngelo. Now, it's from 2004, so a little while back.
Yeah,
And the title, okay, it might make you think it's purely dating advice. And look, it does explore that world, but really, at its heart, it lays out some pretty fundamental principles. Stuff about how we can actually transform ourselves and, get the results we want in pretty much any part of life.
exactly. So don't just think of this as like a retro dating deep dive.
Right.
Our mission here really is to pull out those timeless truths D'Angelo talks about,
Mm-hmm.
those essential shifts in how we think, how we act, things that are just crucial when you, someone listening who wants to see real progress, are aiming for some kind of meaningful change, whatever that actually looks like for you.
Right.
So we're going to unpack how this guide suggests we face that need for our own evolution, how we navigate the inevitable bumps in the road,
Yeah, there are always bumps.
and how we cultivate the kind of mindset that actually gets results. Ready to dive in?
Absolutely. Let's jump straight into maybe the core message, this often uncomfortable but really vital necessity of personal change itself.
Okay, let's get into this. D'Angelo hits you pretty directly, doesn't he? Right from the start.
He does.
He says, you're the only one who really cares about your success. I mean, it sounds a bit blunt, maybe,
A little harsh, yeah.
but there's a real punch of truth there, isn't there? It's about recognizing that ultimately you just can't sit back and wait for someone else to, hand you what you want.
Precisely. The guide really pushes this idea of taking complete ownership, total ownership of your outcomes. Right.
It's about letting go of that urge to make excuses, and understanding that if you truly desire something, the responsibility, well, it rests squarely with you. It's a powerful call to action, really, except you're in the driver's seat.
It reminds me, actually, of something I read in Market Wizards. You know that book?
Oh, yeah. Great.
They talked about these incredibly smart investors, brilliant guys, who still managed to lose a ton of money.
Uh-huh. Why was that?
Well, often it came down to this. They were so convinced their initial idea was right that they'd just stubbornly hold on to losing trades, just completely ignoring all the market signals, basically screaming they were wrong.
Trying to force reality to match their beliefs.
Exactly. And it cost them big time.
That's a fantastic parallel, because what D'Angelo is arguing for here is a similar kind of adaptability. He even quotes that Aikido saying, be the water, not the rock.
Okay, be the water.
Yeah, think about it. Water just flows around obstacles, right? It changes shape effortlessly. A rock, though, it either cracks under pressure or it just sits there, stuck, right?
The message is pretty clear. If you're too rigid, too inflexible in your approach, if you refuse to adjust when things aren't working, well, you're basically setting yourself up for stagnation. Sometimes the smartest move is to adapt yourself, not try to change everything else.
Okay, so we've established why we often need to change. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But how do we actually guide that change? How do we make it happen in a meaningful way? The guide brings up a couple of really interesting ideas here.
Yes, exactly. Moving from just understanding the need for change to actually doing something about it. That's the crucial next step.
All right.
And D'Angelo brings in Napoleon Hill's concept, from Think and Grow Rich, the definite major purpose.
Okay, yeah, I have heard of that. Tell us more. What exactly is a definite major purpose?
So essentially, it's having an incredibly clear goal, like crystal clear. And the guide really emphasizes writing this down, actually formalizing your thoughts about what you want exactly, and also crucially understanding why you want it.
The why is important.
Super important. That clarity acts like a laser focus, It directs your energy, your efforts, where they'll actually be effective. He gives dating examples, sure, meeting interesting people, long-term relationships, casual stuff, but he's very clear this applies everywhere.
Okay.
Having that powerful written statement, it's like your North Star. It makes the whole process of learning and growing much more targeted, organic even. Clarity is power. Writing it down supercharges your focus.
That makes total sense. It's hard to hit a target you can't even see, right?
Exactly.
And then he brings in W. Edward Deming's idea, constant improvement. This isn't about just reaching some finish line and then, like, stopping, is it?
Not at all. It's about embracing this mindset of continuous growth, always growing.
Yeah.
Instead of thinking, okay, done that, achieved it, I'm finished. It's about constantly looking for ways to evolve, to get better. In the dating context, he suggests, don't limit yourself with arbitrary goals like, I want to date a 9.
Yeah.
The idea is to always be striving to improve yourself, even after you've made progress. He even throws in that classic Yoda line,
Oh, yeah. Which one?
there is no try.
Do or do not.
Right? Exactly. To really underscore the importance of full commitment, of doing, well, whatever it takes.
I really like how he connects that consistent effort to creating luck, too.
Yeah.
That idea that by constantly showing up, putting in the work, you actually create opportunities, things that might look like chance from the outside.
Precisely. Consistent effort isn't just about the grind, it's about building skills. And with mastery, well, you get a greater ability to influence outcomes, to, as the guide puts it, get lucky by choice.
Yeah.
And this constant improvement idea, it also works as a kind of safeguard, right, against slipping backward. If you're not actively growing, things can just stagnate or even regress.
Okay, so we know why change is often needed. And we've got some guiding principles for how to approach it. Clear purpose, constant improvement. Well, what trips us up? What gets in the way? The guide spends a lot of time on recognizing the obstacles, and it seems like, well, a lot of them are internal, things we do to ourselves.
Absolutely. DeAngelo argues pretty strongly that we often become our own biggest roadblocks.
How so?
Well, he uses that really common scenario, right? You see someone you'd like to talk to, but then you just don't. You freeze.
Yeah, happens all the time.
And he asks that basic question, why? What is it that actually stops us from taking that first step?
And the answer, according to the guide anyway, is often just our own minds running wild, conjuring up all sorts of negative stuff that stops us even trying.
Exactly. We have this tendency, maybe it's human nature, to imagine the worst case scenarios, rejection, embarrassment, failure. And those imagined outcomes, they become really powerful deterrents. The guide stresses we need to flip that script, start envisioning positive outcomes, things that would actually motivate us to act. But yeah, it acknowledges breaking those ingrained negative thought patterns. It's tough.
That leads into the mention of mean genes, which is, well, it's a fascinating connection. The idea that our actual genetics might kind of predispose us to certain biases and how we assess risk,
Right.
which can lead to self-sabotaging behavior, like our ancient wiring is misfiring in modern life.
Yes, the guide points to that evolutionary perspective, that as humans, we're often, well, we're not perfectly wired for optimal decision-making, not when it comes to risk and reward in the modern world anyway.
Okay.
Our ancestors needed caution when faced with the unknown. It was about physical survival. But that same instinct can now pop up as this excessive fear of psychological risks, like rejection, even when the actual danger is, minimal.
So it creates a cycle.
It can, yeah. A cycle where we miss opportunities, then we beat ourselves up about it, which just reinforces those limiting beliefs. Makes it harder next time.
And then the guide goes into some common reasons for negative emotional states. Starting with that evolutionary survival thing, that fear of the unknown can feel the same as fearing actual failure.
Right. Fear originally was about staying safe from, like, a predator, physical threats.
Yeah.
But that same underlying feeling can now surface as anxiety about trying new things, stepping outside the comfort zone, even when the real risks are tiny.
Okay. Then the second reason he mentions seeking sympathy and attention through negative emotions. This touches on that idea of like victim or martyr complexes.
Yes, unfortunately, sometimes negative emotional states can become a way to get attention. Maybe the initial feeling is genuine, but some people can fall into these patterns because they learn, subconsciously maybe, that it's an effective way to get sympathy, even if it doesn't actually help them fix the problem.
And the third reason, just plain old habit. The concept of anchors. How past events, even seemingly unrelated ones, can trigger negative feelings now. That Christmas example he gives.
Oh yeah, the bad holiday creating a negative feeling around all future Christmases.
Right. It's a really clear illustration of how these anchors, these emotional triggers work. Like a song instantly bringing back a memory, but for feelings.
Absolutely. Repeated associations create these automatic emotional responses. A particular event or situation gets linked to negative feelings almost regardless of the current reality. And these anchors, they can operate totally subconsciously, influencing our mood, our behavior, without us even knowing why.
Now, this next section, identification leading to overgeneralization. That was a real eye-opener for me. The brain's natural tendency to, like, categorize everything, simplify
Yeah,
things.
to make sense of the world.
Right. But how that can lead to some really unhelpful, really broad conclusions.
This is such a critical point. I mean, think about the sheer amount of information hitting us constantly.
It's overwhelming.
Exactly. So our brains are always looking for patterns, similarities,
Yeah.
identifying new experiences with stuff we've seen before. It's efficient, it helps us navigate. But there's a downside. We can lose sight of the individual details. When we rely too much on the simplification, we fall into the trap of overgeneralization. We start connecting unrelated ideas just because they share a few superficial traits.
That lion, tiger, cheetah analogy he used really made it click. It was a survival thing way back when, right? See stripes, run.
Pretty much. But
Mhm.
now it can lead us to make these really broad, sweeping judgments based on pretty limited experiences.
So it's like if you have one bad experience with, say, customer service from one company,
Yeah.
your brain might just jump to, okay, all customer service in that entire industry is terrible. That's overgeneralization.
Exactly. And in the 21st century, a lot of our fears are more psychological, not physical saber-toothed tigers. But those old mechanisms, identification, generalization, they still kick in. And they can limit us in ways that don't actually serve us anymore.
That example of the bald man, that was powerful. Gets rejected once, then sees an ad reinforcing some negative stereotype.
And suddenly internalizes this belief that no woman will ever be interested.
Yeah.
It shows how these emotional experiences can create these really restrictive mental prisons.
Right. These overgeneralizations, these negative meanings we attach, they become self-imposed limits.
They absolutely can.
And then the guide talks about how identification entails the wrong meaning. So that it's not just about connecting similar things, but also about the interpretations we assign based on our existing beliefs about ourselves and the world.
Right. Our brains are constantly trying to make sense of new info by fitting it into our existing mental framework. That awkward first school dance example.
Oh yeah, the dancing.
It shows perfectly how a negative experience in one very specific situation, I didn't know how to dance, can get generalized. It gets assigned a much broader negative meaning, like, I'm just not good in social situations with women, period.
And that four-step process he outlines, how we gather, process, and respond, that was really insightful, highlighting all the points where things can go wrong, especially those subconscious filters and associations we don't even notice.
Yes. From simply missing signals in the first place
Perception limitations, yeah.
to our mental filters, just unconsciously blocking important info, like maybe missing eye contact because we're already assuming rejection.
Okay.
Then connecting new signals to the wrong past memories, like assuming someone didn't call back because they hate you, not because they lost your number.
Right, the unreturned phone call example.
And finally, taking the wrong actions based on all that flawed understanding. There are so many ways our internal processing can go off track, and the guide really emphasizes those first 3 steps, mostly happening below conscious awareness,
Wow.
which makes it even more crucial to make a conscious effort, to examine our perceptions, our internal states, try to catch those faulty connections.
Okay, finally, in this recognizing the obstacle section, he dives into the alluring victim syndrome. This idea that we can kind of fall into thinking that, external forces are completely controlling all the bad stuff in our lives.
This is a really powerful trap, and often sneaky.
Huh?
Well, the victim syndrome, it can provide this weird sense of comfort because it lets us deflect blame, right? Avoid the hard work of making changes, sometimes even gain sympathy. The guide lists several reasons why this mindset can be appealing. It's easy to point fingers, you avoid effort, you get attention, maybe manipulate others emotionally, rely on feelings instead of logic. It can even be learned behavior.
But the key takeaway here, it seems, is that embracing that victim mentality, it's ultimately disempowering, isn't it?
Totally.
It prevents any real progress because you're essentially just giving away your own power, your agency to make things better.
Precisely. By blaming everything on external forces, you give up your own ability to influence outcomes. The guide really hammers this home. Take responsibility for your part. Learn from the negative experiences. Look at setbacks as risks you took while trying to achieve something worthwhile. Don't just be passive.
Okay, so we've identified the need for change. We've looked at the obstacles, many internal. Now, let's get to the solution part. Adopting a more successful attitude.
It sounds like this is where we start to actively take charge, reshape our mindset.
Absolutely. According to the guide, a fundamental shift we need to make is to consciously choose to perceive our experiences more positively.
Oh.
Instead of getting stuck asking, whose fault is this? The focus shifts. You start asking yourself, okay, how can I make this better?
That simple reframe. Wow, it feels incredibly potent.
It is.
It immediately takes you from feeling helpless to feeling like you have some control, some agency. And the guide mentions how our overall outlook, positive or negative, actually shapes what we even notice.
Exactly. A negative mindset tends to be on the lookout for problems, right?
Right.
Expecting failure. Whereas a more positive outlook is much more likely to spot opportunities, potential solutions. Cultivating a positive mindset, he suggests, isn't just about, like, naive optimism. It's a proactive step towards actually creating success. This leads right into the idea of making mental feedback loops positive. How our conscious and subconscious minds are always talking to each other,
Uh-huh.
and how we can consciously start to influence those deeper, often automatic patterns of thought, like your thoughts create your reality, sort of.
Pretty much. The guide describes this really powerful feedback cycle. Our subconscious beliefs, our patterns, they influence our conscious thoughts and behaviors. But the good news is, with conscious effort, we can begin to reprogram those subconscious patterns.
But it takes effort.
Oh, absolutely. Consistent vigilance, constantly identifying those unproductive negative thoughts as they pop up, and then actively challenging them, reframing them.
Like that example he gave,
Yeah.
thinking that person probably wouldn't be interested.
Yeah, and consciously replacing it with something more empowering, like, hey, I have something interesting to offer. That's exactly how it works. Little shifts, consistently applied.
It really is like retraining your brain. And the guide is realistic, right?
Yeah.
It says this isn't an overnight fix.
Definitely not. It takes time, consistent effort, because those negative patterns, often they've been ingrained for years.
Yeah.
But the potential payoff, I mean, it extends far beyond just dating into every aspect of life. It makes it a really worthwhile endeavor, I think. That ability to consciously influence your subconscious, it's an incredibly powerful tool for growth everywhere.
Okay, the next point is reinterpretation to eliminate failure. This sounds like it's all about changing how we look at setbacks, mistakes, that kind of thing.
Precisely. The guide emphasizes reprogramming how we interpret the world around us. That example of seeing someone attractive dressed a certain way.
Right, and challenging assumptions about their intentions.
Yeah. But the real core of this section is about reframing failure itself. That Malcolm Forbes quote, "Failure is success if you learn from it." That really nails it. As long as you're taking away lessons from your mistakes, you're actually moving forward. You're learning.
So it's about shifting away from wanting everything to be perfect right away.
Ex-
And instead, seeing the value in the process.
Yeah.
Building skills, understanding that mastery often involves some, well, missteps.
Exactly. The guide warns against that magic bullet mentality, the belief there's just one perfect technique that works every time.
Which isn't realistic.
Not at all. Real-world interactions, challenges. They're complex. Learning involves trial and error. So the advice is, focus on mastering one solid fundamental approach first, before trying to learn every advanced trick in the book.
Build a foundation.
Right. Failure, in this view, isn't some final judgment on you. It's valuable feedback. It helps you refine your approach, adopting that investment perspective where you actually expect some setbacks and you actively look for the lessons inside them that can really take the fear out of failure.
Then there's the really crucial point about the influence of others and that concept of the reference group. This highlights the huge impact our social circle has on us.
Oh, this is huge. And it's a really well-established idea in psychology, too. We just tend to adopt the attitudes, the beliefs, even the behaviors of the people we spend the most time with. It just kind of happens.
So the advice is,
Be intentional about it. The guide strongly advises actively, maybe even ruthlessly, eliminating negative influences in your life and consciously surrounding yourself with people who are already successful in the areas where you want to improve.
makes sense.
It even encourages actively seeking out help, mentorship from those who've already achieved what you're aiming for. Learn from them.
And finally, in this adopting a more successful attitude section, the guide gets really specific with techniques in inner work and mental preparation.
Yes, this part is all about harnessing the power of our internal dialogue, our mental imagery. It really emphasizes using positive self-talk, affirmations, visualization, and actively working to discourage that inner critic while focusing on visualizing the outcomes you want, especially after setbacks.
Okay, let's talk through some of those exercises. The first one, controlling your emotions and inner states. This involves identifying desired feelings and anchoring them to physical actions.
Exactly. The underlying idea is that our feelings, our states, are essentially created in our imagination. So, by consciously recalling past experiences where you felt a specific positive emotion like confidence or happiness,
Yeah.
and at the same time associating it with a unique physical action like a specific way of breathing or maybe clenching your fist in a certain way.
You created a trigger.
Precisely. A trigger that allows you to intentionally access that desired emotional state later whenever you need it. The guide suggests practicing this in different environments to really lock it in.
Interesting. Okay, exercise 2. Ideal self-image. This is about creating a really vivid mental picture of the person you want to become.
Yeah, really visualizing it. Not just the external stuff, posture, clothes, expression, although that's part of it, but also digging into the internal qualities, like their core beliefs, how they handle different situations. What are the underlying reasons for their confident demeanor? You imagine all that. And then there's this powerful visualization technique.
The million dots.
Yeah, where you imagine this ideal self sort of multiplying and permeating every part of your life. It helps really embed that image in your subconscious.
Okay. Exercise 3 is timeline. This one sounds a bit deeper, exploring past experiences.
It is. This involves creating a mental representation of your own life, like a line stretching out. Then you visualize yourself floating above it, moving through different times in your past. Especially focusing on experiences that might be linked to negativity or trauma. The guide calls them dark spots. The core idea is to imagine this source of positive energy, like a golden light,
Okay.
flowing onto the timeline, symbolically healing those past wounds. And reframing those dark spots not as just bad things, but as valuable learning experiences that ultimately shaped who you are now.
Wow, that's quite involved. And the final exercise in this section is surprisingly simple. Just repeating, I like myself 10 times with feeling. It almost sounds too easy.
It might sound simplistic, yeah. But the guide really emphasizes its power. It directly challenges those deep-seated feelings of low self-esteem that hold so many people back.
How?
By consciously, repeatedly affirming self-acceptance, you start to dismantle those negative self-beliefs. You cultivate a stronger sense of self-worth, a feeling that you actually deserve success. It tackles that anchor of low self-esteem head-on.
Okay, so we've covered the need for change, the obstacles, a whole toolkit for adopting a better attitude. Now, let's touch on some common pitfalls, things people often stumble into on this journey.
Yeah, this is really critical because even with the best intentions, the right strategies, it's surprisingly easy to get derailed. The first pitfall highlighted is unrealistic expectations.
Right. That initial burst of enthusiasm can sometimes lead to setting the bar way too high, way too fast.
Exactly.
And then we get really discouraged and we don't see immediate, miracle results.
Totally. The guide advises using that initial excitement, sure, but also using it to acknowledge the potential challenges, the setbacks that are likely to happen. Don't just expect effortless success.
Right.
It reminds us that truly internalizing these principles, letting them really sink into the subconscious, that takes time. Consistent effort. He uses that great analogy of a memory foam pillow.
Oh, yeah.
How it always wants to spring back to its original shape, just like our old habits try to pull us back.
Yeah, that's a good one. Okay, second pitfall, the paralysis of analysis.
Yeah.
Getting so bogged down in learning the theory, the strategies, that you never actually do anything.
Oh, this is such a common trap. Especially when you're dealing with something that triggers anxiety, right? Like preaching people, putting yourself out there. Studying can feel safe.
It feels like progress, but it's not really.
Exactly. It becomes a form of procrastination, a way to avoid the discomfort of real-world experience. The guide really stresses the crucial difference between just knowing stuff theoretically
Book learning.
and the genuine conviction, the confidence that only comes from actually doing things, learning from experience, both the wins and the losses. That's where real knowledge comes from.
The third pitfall, jumping to mastery. Trying to learn really advanced stuff before you've nailed the basics.
Yeah, like trying to run before you can walk, or that skiing analogy, trying difficult moguls before you can even stay upright on the flat.
Right.
The guide really stresses delay gratification. Build your skills step by step. Focus on mastering the fundamentals first before you try jumping ahead to complex strategies. It also points out, pay attention to all the steps in a process. Not just the first one, like getting a phone number, but what happens next.
The whole picture.
The whole picture. Start with basic steps, maybe props or canned lines if that helps, and gradually progress. Build brick by brick.
Okay. And the final common pitfall is not valuing the result. Basically, if the goal you're chasing isn't truly important to you, deep down.
Yeah.
It just won't provide enough motivation, enough fuel to push through the tough parts.
Precisely. If the discomfort of taking action, stepping outside your comfort zone, if that feels worse than the discomfort of staying where you are,
Then nothing changes.
then real change just isn't going to happen. The guide underscores it. Improvement requires effort. It requires taking some risks. And ultimately, each person has to decide for themselves. Is the potential reward, that outcome you want, is it truly worth that investment of energy and courage?
So as we start to wrap things up here,
Mm.
wow, we've taken a really deep dive into double your dating, how to change yourself.
Mm.
And yeah, despite the title, the core principles,
Yeah,
they're incredibly broad, applicable to so many areas.
absolutely.
We've explored that fundamental need, taking full responsibility for our own success, the importance of guiding our growth with a clear purpose and that commitment to continuous improvement.
Right. And we looked hard at those common internal obstacles, the mental traps that can really sabotage us, negative thinking, overgeneralizing, that sneaky victim mentality.
Yeah, and we also examined a whole range of strategies for adopting more successful attitude, actively cultivating positive feedback loops, consciously reinterpreting failure as learning,
Leveraging the influence of our social circles, that reference group idea.
and engaging in that crucial inner work. Mental preparation, those specific exercises for state control, self-image, the timeline thing.
And finally, touching on those common pitfalls that can trip anyone up, unrealistic expectations, paralysis of analysis, jumping ahead too fast.
And while this guide, okay, it came from the dating advice world originally, it's really clear, isn't it? The underlying lessons about how we approach change, how we overcome our own internal stuff, how we cultivate a mindset for success, they're absolutely universal, applicable to any area where you, our listener, are looking to grow and improve.
Couldn't agree more. The core message here resonates way beyond romance. It's fundamentally about taking control of your own development, actively shaping the outcomes you truly desire, whatever they might be.
So here's a final thought, something for you to maybe chew on after this deep dive. Think about just one small area of your life, right now, today. Where would you really like to see a positive shift? Now, how could you take just one of the principles we talked about, maybe consciously reframing a recent setback as a learning opportunity, or making a deliberate effort just once today to challenge a negative thought pattern when it pops up?
Yeah, just one small thing.
Consider how even making one small intentional application of these ideas, how it could create a positive ripple effect, start to set you on a more positive, more productive path. It really is all about taking that first step, isn't it, towards becoming the person you truly want to be.